Hi everybody, this is Greg with the Dice Must Flow, and I'm beginning to work through my backlog of games that I got from Gen Con, and I decided I'm going to actually call this segment, they're really not reviews that I've been doing, sometimes they're open box, but really what I'm trying to do with these is let's just take a look at the game. And so that's what I'm going to call these segments from now on. Let's take a look at ... Because I really don't want to be the one preaching and saying this is what I do like or don't like too much about the game or giving it a rating. I'm not really here for that. Pretty much if there's a game that I'm reviewing, it's something I like and I want to share my like of that game with you guys. And so with our first official title of let's take a look at The Last Spike. At the start of the game, each player is going to draw 4 tiles randomly, and these would all be face down from the tile bin. As you can see, there's different tiles with different numbers on them, and these numbers or these tiles associate with where these go onto the board. So for example, this is X4, it would go into the X4 slot. This is Z3, it would go into the Z3 slot. So we would have these tiles for this player, and this player over here would have 4 other tiles. And these tiles are secret. Nobody knows what they are except the player that did the draw. And play proceeds each turn. You can lay a tile onto the map, and to lay a tile onto the map, you have to pay the amount listed on the tile. After you lay a tile on the map, you would do payouts to players, if there is, and we'll talk about that later. And then finally, you would draw a new tile. So if this player laid this tile here, he would then get to buy a card anywhere he wanted, and then draw a new tile. So let's talk about laying a train track onto the board. The cost is $3,000, or the cost is basically the cost on the tile. There's different tiles have different costs. If you lay the tile next to a city, one of the circles, then the cost is the same. If you're continuing a track, if we'll just pretend that these continued, they would cost that cost. If you lay a tile that's just sort of out in the middle of nowhere, for example, X2 here is out in the middle of nowhere, it's not next to a city, it's not a continuation of a track, then that cost is doubled. So let's talk about buying land. Each city has a free land. You see St. Louis has a cost 0, and you can see all these have a cost 0. So the initial cost, or the cost to buy a land, is listed on the card, and you would have to buy one of the lands first. So you get the first one for 0, and then different ones have different prices, but like El Paso here, the second one costs $4,000, the third one costs $5,000. So as you're playing the game, when each of these spurs get completed, and I'm not going to use the right letters and stuff here just to show you, this is a completed spur between El Paso and Dodge City. And then everybody who owns El Paso or Dodge City land would get a payout. And that payout is dependent on the number of cards of that type they own. So if somebody owned 2 El Pasos, they would get a payout of $16,000. If somebody owned 1 Dodge City, they would get $7,000. If somebody owned all 5 Dodge Cities, they would get $35,000. So you are playing in an attempt to complete these spurs. And one thing you'll notice is that both St. Louis and Sacramento only have 2 spurs, but everybody in El Paso and Laramie also only have 2 spurs. But the other guys, Omaha has 3, Dodge City has 3, Denver has 4, Yuma has 3, Ogden has 3. And so that may help determine which ones you're going to buy. When buying land cards, it's only the person who lays next to the city that gets the free land card. And that land cannot be bought until that spur has started at least one of these locations. And players can't buy the more expensive ones underneath until the free one is taken. So essentially, people are locked in and out of buying areas until the tiles next to the cities have been purchased. And players that get that free land by placing X4 there and claiming the land for Yuma, they cannot buy another land that turn. They just have to take that one. So in this game, we have chips that represent the money. And you can see over on the board it's listed. A white chip is 1. The red is 5,000, 1,000, 5,000, and blue is 10,000. And depending on the number of players in the game, that's going to start at a different amount. A 4-player game, they get 40,000 each. A 6-player game gets 30,000 each. And a 2-player game gets 60,000 each. So as I mentioned, each turn is play a tile, pay for it, buy a land card. So what if you have a tile, you don't have any next to anything, and you have to pay or lay one out here, like for this one, and it's out in the middle of nowhere? That cost was $6,000, but what if you don't have $6,000? So at that point, you would have to sell land back to the bank. And when you sell land, you can sell it back to the bank for half the cost, rounding up. So they say in the rules, for an example, 5,000 land is sold back to the bank for 3,000. And 2 or more cards might have to be sold to get enough money to lay that tile. And if you can't raise that cash, you are bankrupt and you go out of the game. And finally, the last spike. The game ends when there's a coast-to-coast railway built. So it could go this way, it could go this way, it could go any way, like that. Once a coast-to-coast line can totally be drawn, the game ends. And the player that places the tile that finally completes that line, they get a $20,000 bonus. So after this last spike is played, the person collects the bonus for the last spike. And then the payout for the 2 connected cities, if, for example, if it was here, the payout would be for Ogden and Denver. After completing the payout for Ogden and Denver, in this case, if this was the last spike that was played, and we had a completed line, and I'm just throwing tiles out here to show that. Okay, so we have an almost completed line, and if we played this tile V2 for the last spike, that would complete a Continental Railroad. The last spike bonus would be paid to the player. Ogden to Denver would be paid off, and the game would end. At this point, you would calculate how much money each player has, and whoever has the most money wins the game. You might notice that some players might have land in an area that never got completed, in which case that land is essentially worthless. It never got paid. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the strategy in this game. And this game did get a Mensa award for its gameplay, and that's because there's many interesting situations that come up. You're trying to build these tracks, and so you have a limited hand or whatever of tiles that you're playing from. So you always have a choice of trying to build or play. Which one should you play? Should you be playing one next to this to start something new? Should you be trying to complete one? If you buy land, if you buy too much, nobody's going to play that. And the other interesting thing is when you get sort of to a stage of a game where everybody's played the quote-unquote easy tiles, and you only have tiles that are going to fill in and help somebody else. And so which one of those do you play? And that really kind of gets into a real thinking game. And so that is the last spike. The game is very much like Acquire, where you're merging hotels and playing tiles. And just with a kind of a cool railroad theme and buying the land. As our taking a look at the game ends, what do I think of the game? Well, I really like Acquire, and that's why I picked this game up. It's like I like Acquire, I like train games, and so this game was an instant winner for me. Honestly, was disappointed with some of the components. The board I thought was a little thin. Acquire has things that hold these. If the board gets knocked, these guys typically are going to move out. And the chit colors, I mean, they're wood, and these components are wood, and so that's nice. Originally, I was taken aback by having to put the stickers on, but I understand that's a cost savings. I probably would have preferred having the stickers to put on these chips too. Just kind of don't like the fact that it's have to remember the color, even though it's on the board. So these are negatives, but overall, the game is a positive experience. If you like train games and stock games, you should probably give this one a try. And so that's it for now, and we will talk to you next time. And so if you like my show, please go ahead and subscribe. It's really important for me to try and show people that the channel's growing and people are really liking the show. So if you look down in the corner down there, you're going to find a little subscribe box. Go ahead, click it, and that'll help a lot. Thanks.